The storm had teeth. Iris could feel it in the way the wind clawed at the farmhouse windows, in the electric charge that made her skin prickle and her breath come shallow. October in the Appalachian foothills wasn't gentle, but tonight felt intentional, like the weather itself was hunting. She'd lived alone in this place for 3 years. The old Ashford property sat 6 miles from Millbrook, far enough that she'd escaped the suffocating pity of a small town that remembered her as the girl whose parents drowned. Far enough that she could breathe without feeling the weight of other people's tragedy pressing against her ribs. The house creaked, an old, familiar sound. Iris didn't look up from her tea. The mug was chipped, the liquid long gone lukewarm. Outside, rain hammered the tin roof in a rhythm that almost felt like Morse code. A warning, a call, something. She'd been having the dreams again. For weeks now, they'd seeped into her nights like ink through paper. Always the same. A wolf with silver eyes standing at the edge of a forest she didn't recognize, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race even as she slept. The wolf never moved, never growled. It simply waited, as if it had all the time in the world, and she was worth every second of it. When she woke, her sheets were soaked with sweat, and her skin burned with a longing so acute it felt like grief. Iris set down her mug and moved to the window. The porch light cast a weak halo against the darkness, illuminating sheets of rain that looked almost solid. The forest beyond was a black void. No stars, no moon, just the sense of vast, hungry emptiness pressing against the thin walls of her refuge. That's when she heard it. Not the wind, not the rain. Something else. A sound like an animal in pain, muffled and distant. Iris's hand pressed against the cold glass. Every rational part of her brain screamed to stay inside. Doors locked, house sealed, safe. She grabbed her jacket anyway. The porch steps were slick, and the wind immediately stole her breath. The sound came again, closer now, from the direction of the tree line. Her nearest neighbor was a mile away. No one else would hear this. No one else would come. Iris had spent 3 years telling herself she was done rescuing people, done being the one who waded into dangerous water, done being the hero of a tragedy. But some instincts run deeper than survival. She found him at the edge of the property, where the manicured grass gave way to wild things. The man was collapsed half on the gravel drive, half on the mud, and he was huge, the kind of large that made her instinctively know he was dangerous, even unconscious. His dark hair was plastered to his skull. His clothes were torn and soaked, clinging to a chest that rose and fell in uneven, ragged breaths. There was no vehicle, no explanation for how he'd gotten here. "Hey!" Iris called out, though the wind swallowed her voice. She approached carefully, scanning the darkness for movement, for threats. The storm had a quality of deliberate malice now, as if it had been herding him toward her. As if it had been hurting him. Up close, she could see blood mixing with rainwater on his arms. Deep scratches, like he'd been clawed by something. His face was angular, sharp, beautiful in the way that wild things are beautiful. Before they bite you. He couldn't have been more than 35, but there was something ancient about him, something that made her spine straighten with an awareness she couldn't name. Iris knelt beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" His eyes snapped open. Silver, exactly like in her dreams. She gasped, jerking backward, but his hand shot out and gripped her wrist. Not hard. If anything, his fingers were shaking, but the touch sent a jolt through her nervous system like lightning. Her vision swam. The world tilted. For a moment she was elsewhere, standing in a stone hall that smelled of pine and wolf, ancient tapestries hanging from walls, and him standing before her in a form that was and wasn't human, power radiating off him in visible waves. Then the rain hit her face, and she was back. "Don't," he said, and his voice was ruined, hoarse, fractured, but gentle, so impossibly gentle. Don't touch me, I can't stay here, I have to leave. You're hurt. Iris's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant. The connection between them felt like a rope that had been tied around her heart before she was born, being pulled taut for the first time. Come inside. Let me help. You don't understand. His silver eyes searched her face with an intensity that felt like being seen all the way through to her bones. When he looked at her, she felt known, recognized, like she'd been a phantom her whole life and he was the only one who could see her solid form. If I come inside that house, if I stay near you, people die, things die, I'll destroy you. Let me decide that, Iris whispered. Something broke in his expression. He closed his eyes, and she watched as he wrestled with something invisible and immense. The storm raged around them. Rain plastered her clothes to her skin, and then, slowly, he nodded. Iris, he said, still not opening his eyes. Your name is Iris. I've been dreaming of you for 6 months. She didn't ask how he knew her name. Somehow she'd known he would. What's yours? She asked. Damien. He opened his eyes and looked at her with something like resignation, something like surrender. And I'm going to ruin your life. But he let her help him up. Let her guide him toward the farmhouse, toward light and safety, and whatever choice she was making by bringing a wounded stranger into her home. The storm seemed to ease slightly, as if it had gotten what it wanted. As they crossed the threshold, Iris caught the scent of him, wild sage, pine, and something older, something that smelled like magic and blood and ancient sorrow. Every nerve in her body hummed with a recognition that preceded thought. In the yellow light of her kitchen, she could see the cuts on his arms more clearly. They were already beginning to close, muscle knitting together at an impossible speed. He watched her watching him with those silver eyes, and there was apology in them, longing, and beneath it all, a fear so profound it made her chest ache. The dreams, she said. Were they real? Real as anything, he said softly. And a curse. The farmhouse had never felt small until Damien was in it. Iris moved through her kitchen in careful, deliberate motions, gathering first aid supplies from the bathroom cabinet, boiling water, finding clean towels. Mundane actions that kept her hands busy while her mind spiraled. He sat at her kitchen table, perfectly still, watching her with those silver eyes that seemed to catalog every breath she took. You're staring, she said, not unkindly, as she set down antiseptic and gauze. I know. His voice was quieter now, less strained. The tremors that had racked his body when she'd helped him inside had subsided, but tension radiated from him like heat from a fire. I'm trying not to be. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Iris moved closer and gently took his left arm, examining the scratches. They were already fading, pink lines instead of deep wounds, the healing accelerating visibly even as she watched. She'd read enough folklore living in Appalachia to know what that meant, to know what he was. Because looking at you is... He paused, searching for the word. Painful. Iris glanced up. Their eyes met, and the connection hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just attraction, though there was that too. A primal pull that made her skin feel too tight. It was something else, something that felt like recognition, like coming home to a place you'd never been. The dreams, she said, keeping her voice steady. You said you'd been dreaming of me for 6 months. How is that possible? Damien turned his arm slightly, letting her work. His jaw tightened. Because the curse has been looking for an anchor, a way out, and apparently it found you. The word curse hung in the air between them, heavy as a stone. Iris finished cleaning the remaining scratches and sat back, the gauze forgotten in her lap. Start from the beginning. Please. He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. The kitchen ticked around them, the old refrigerator humming, the clock above the stove marking time in precise, indifferent intervals. Outside, the storm was easing, though the wind still pressed against the windows with occasional gusts that made the panes rattle. "I'm an alpha," Damien began, his voice low and measured, like he'd rehearsed this confession 1,000 times and dreaded it every time. "Of a pack, the largest in the Eastern Territories. My family has held that position for 8 generations." Iris said nothing, simply waited. The folksy stories about shifters that circulated in Millbrook, half joking, half serious, suddenly didn't feel so much like folklore. 200 years ago, my ancestor made a bargain with something old. Something that existed before the packs, before the bloodlines. He wanted power, dominion over the other shifters, the ability to rule without challenge. Damien's hands clenched on the table. He got it, but the price was paid in bloodline. Every alpha born after him carries a mark, a sickness in the magic itself. What kind of sickness? The kind that poisons everything we care about. His voice cracked slightly. My mother went mad. My father never bonded with a mate. He was terrified he'd infect her like a disease. I've watched every alpha before me burn through their lives trying to find a way to break it, or at least to contain it. And I've known since I was 16 that I would carry the same weight. Iris leaned forward slightly. "But you're here. You found me. So there must be a loophole," Damien finished. "The curse can't be broken. The old magic that binds it is too deep, too ancient. But it can be redirected, balanced. If an alpha accepts his fated mate, truly accepts the bond without reservation, the curse's energy gets channeled through the connection instead of poisoning everything around him." The words landed like thunder. "Fated mate," Iris repeated slowly. "You're saying that's me." "I'm saying the universe seems to think so." He finally looked away from her, running a hand through his still damp hair. "6 months ago, I started having visions, a woman with green eyes and chestnut hair, a farmhouse, the smell of old wood and wildflowers, and with every dream, the pull got stronger. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury myself in pack business, in the belief that this was the curse playing tricks, showing me the one thing I could never have." "What changed?" Iris asked, though she thought she knew. "The dreams got clearer, more insistent. And then 3 weeks ago, I started getting visions of danger, of you in the water, that river near your property, of something dark watching you." His silver eyes finally met hers again, and they were raw, desperate. "I came here to warn you away, to make sure you left Millbrook, got somewhere safe where the curse couldn't reach you through proximity. But then the storm came, and I shifted to move faster, and a rogue pack—" He stopped, jaw working. "They were hunting something, someone, and when I intervened, they didn't back down." "You fought them for me?" Iris felt something twist inside her chest. "I fought them because it was the only way to keep you alive." He leaned back slightly. "But I should have stayed away, should have sent an emissary, found another way. Being near you is dangerous, Iris. The closer I am, the more the curse activates. It feeds on the bond. It gets stronger." "Or," Iris said quietly, "it's testing it." Damien frowned. "What?" "Ancient magic doesn't usually work in straight lines," she said. She'd spent the last 3 years reading everything she could find in the Millbrook Library, folklore, mythology, local histories, trying to understand the world beyond the rational one. If this curse has been around for 200 years, it's evolved, it's intelligent. Maybe it needs to know if the bond is real before it can be balanced. "You're talking about things you don't understand. Then teach me." Iris reached across the table and touched his hand. The moment her skin met his, the world seemed to tilt again, not into that stone hall this time, but into something vast and wordless. A sensation of being pulled, of two halves trying to snap together like magnets. "I've been dreaming of you too, Damien, for months. Feeling watched, feeling wanted. And I'm still here. I didn't run." "You should." "Why?" Because you're scared? Because your family curse might hurt me? Iris's voice was steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. I watched my parents drown, Damien. I've spent 3 years living in isolation because I was terrified of losing anyone else. And then you showed up in a storm, half dead and desperate, and every instinct I have is screaming at me to let you stay. He stared at their joined hands like they were something dangerous. The curse is testing us, she interrupted, which means we need to pass the test, together. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain began to ease into a gentle patter, and in the yellow kitchen light of a farmhouse at the edge of the world, a man with silver eyes and a woman with no more fear to give leaned toward each other with the weight of destiny between them. If you're wrong about this, Damien whispered, if you're wrong and the curse wins, then at least I'll know I was brave enough to try, Iris said, and she didn't let go. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window in pale gold strands, revealing the wreckage of the night before. Empty tea mugs, damp towels draped over chairs, Damien's torn jacket folded carefully on the counter, evidence of a stranger's arrival that Iris was still processing. She hadn't slept. Neither had he. They'd talked through the darkness, Damien gradually revealing fragments of a world that existed beneath the surface of Millbrook's everyday normalcy. He told her about pack hierarchies, about the way the full moon amplified a shifter's connection to their wolf form, about the binding magic that kept rogue packs from hunting too close to human settlements. Iris asked questions in a voice that grew steadier with each answer, as if she were learning a language her body had always known, but her mind was only now translating. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion had finally caught up with her. Damien had guided her to the living room couch and sat beside her while she dozed fitfully, her hand never quite letting go of his. Every time she drifted toward sleep, she felt the pull, that magnetic awareness of him, the sense that some essential part of her was attuned to his presence like a compass needle to magnetic north. Now, as early morning crept across the farmhouse, Iris stirred from the kitchen chair where she'd finally collapsed. Damien was at the window, fully dressed in clothes she'd found in her father's old trunk, a black sweater that clung to his broad shoulders, jeans that fit him with unsettling precision. His silver eyes tracked something beyond the glass that Iris couldn't see. "What are you looking at?" she asked, her voice rough with exhaustion. "Your property," he said without turning. "There are marks, old ones. Someone's been watching this place for longer than I have." Iris moved to stand beside him. The morning was clear, the storm having scrubbed the world clean. Her farmhouse sat isolated on its small rise, surrounded by overgrown fields and the dark line of forest beyond. She'd always loved the solitude. Now it felt exposing. "Could it be your pack?" she asked. "No." His jaw tightened. "My pack doesn't know I'm here. I came alone," which was reckless and stupid, and now I'm beginning to understand why every alpha before me avoided this situation entirely. "Because they were cowards," Iris said simply. He glanced at her, a ghost of something like amusement crossing his features. "Because they were wise." Before Iris could respond, her phone buzzed from the counter. She'd nearly forgotten she owned one. 3 years of minimal contact had made technology feel like an artifact from another life. The text was from Margaret Chen, who ran the town's small grocery and seemed to have appointed herself as Iris's social overseer. "Heard there was a stranger in town. Dark hair, tall. Saw him at the edge of forest yesterday morning. Be careful, hun. Some people don't belong here." Iris deleted the message without responding, but the words lingered. "Some people don't belong here." "The town knows," she said quietly. "Or Margaret knows, which means everyone will soon." "I need to leave," Damien said immediately, turning from the window. "I should have left hours ago. Staying here is only making this worse. The closer I am to you, the more the curse activates, and the rogue pack I fought last night, they were tracking something. If they pick up my scent here, if they connect you to me—" "Then we deal with it," Iris interrupted. You said the bond could balance the curse. That means we need time. That means you can't run the moment things get complicated. Iris, what were you running from when the storm caught you? She stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. You came here deliberately. The dreams pulled you here. So don't tell me you need to leave. Tell me what you're really afraid of. Damien's expression hardened into something ancient and weary. He moved away from her, pacing the narrow kitchen like a caged predator. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. 3 years ago, I almost bonded with a woman, he said finally. Sarah. She was strong, intelligent, from an aligned pack. On paper, she was perfect. We tried to force it, the bond, I mean. Thought maybe if we worked hard enough, wanted it badly enough, the curse would recognize the intention and back off. He paused. She went into seizures during the attempt. The curse was poisoning her from the inside out, trying to reject her because the bond wasn't genuine. She was in the hospital for a month. Iris felt something cold slide down her spine. But she survived. Physically, his voice was hollow. Mentally, she's never been the same. She won't go near shifters anymore, won't even drive through wolf territory. She's trapped in a human city, terrified of anything that reminds her of what happened. He finally looked at Iris. That's what I'm afraid of. That you're brave now, that you think you can handle this, and then the curse gets bored with testing and decides to consume. The honesty of it was devastating. Iris could see the weight he carried, not just the curse itself, but the responsibility, the guilt. The absolute certainty that love from him was a dangerous thing. Tell me about the marks on my property, she said, changing the subject deliberately. The ones being watched. Damien seemed grateful for the pivot. There are scent markers. They're old, at least a year or two, but they're territorial. A rogue pack claimed this area at some point. They've probably moved on, but they might come back, Iris finished. Especially if they catch your scent here. Yes. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Through the window she could see the forest edge, the ancient trees that had stood long before her family bought this property, that would stand long after she was gone. In those trees, things moved that most humans would never know about. Creatures bound by magic older than civilization, living by rules that predated the law. You need to teach me, she said. Not just about the curse and the bond. About how to move in your world, how to understand the signs and the dangers. If I'm going to help you pass whatever test this is, I need to stop being helpless. Damien studied her for a long moment. You're not helpless. Then stop treating me like I am. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition perhaps of her steel. There's a ritual, old magic. It would allow me to mark you as claimed, bonded. It would create a temporary ward around this property, enough to discourage casual hunters. Would it hurt? No. He stepped closer, moving slowly, giving her time to pull away. He didn't. But it would be intimate. It would deepen the connection between us. And it would be visible to anyone who knows how to look. Iris understood what he was saying, that this was a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. That once they took this step, the bond would become undeniable, irreversible, that the curse would know she was serious. She tilted her head, exposing the soft curve where her neck met her shoulder. Then mark me, she said. Let's stop pretending we're not already bound. Damien's breath caught. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then his hand rose, trembling slightly, and he touched her neck with fingertips that felt like they were burning. His eyes shifted, silver becoming molten, and Iris felt the pull intensify until it was almost unbearable. The first drop of rain began to fall outside, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The marking ritual should have been simple. Damien's lips found the curve where her neck met her shoulder, and for a moment, Iris felt nothing but warmth and a strange sense of completion, like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Then his teeth grazed her skin, gentle but purposeful, and the world exploded into sensation. Fire and ice, pleasure and pain, a connection that felt like it was rewriting her on a cellular level. She gasped, her hands finding purchase on his shoulders, and felt the shift happening beneath her fingertips, muscle tensing, bones rearranging subtly as his wolf form tried to surface. He pulled back sharply, breathing hard, fighting for control. "Damien?" Iris's voice came out shaky. The mark on her neck was warm, pulsing with a magic she could feel thrumming through her bloodstream like a second heartbeat. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping away, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't think. The bond is too strong, too raw. When I try to channel the marking through ritual magic, it's fighting me. The curse is—" He didn't finish. Instead, he turned away from her and walked to the kitchen sink, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles went white. Iris could see the tremors running through him, the way his breathing came in controlled, measured intervals. He was fighting something, fighting hard. "What's happening?" she asked, moving toward him cautiously. "The curse responds to proximity," he said, his voice strained. "To genuine bonding. And you're not a half measure, Iris. You're the real thing. Which means the curse is activating faster than I anticipated. It's recognizing the bond as legitimate. Which means it's beginning to feed." "Feed on what?" He finally turned to face her, and his eyes were no longer silver. They were black, pupils blown wide, something feral and ancient looking out from behind them. "On me. On the connection between us. And if I'm not careful, it will consume the bond itself in the process of trying to balance." Iris felt her stomach drop. So the marking was premature. He dragged a hand across his face, seemingly trying to wrestle his features back into something human. "I should have waited, should have let us build the connection more gradually. But you asked, and I wanted it so badly that I stopped thinking about consequences." The accusation was mild, but it was there. Iris felt it like a physical blow. "You're blaming me?" "I'm blaming myself." His voice was sharp now, edged with something like self-hatred. "For being weak. For wanting you so badly that I risked hurting you. For being exactly like every alpha before me, selfish enough to believe that what I want matters more than your safety." "That's not fair," Iris said, but doubt had already begun to creep in. "You warned me. You told me the curse was dangerous." "I did more than warn you." Damien moved toward the kitchen table and sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "I lied to you, Iris, about why I came here." The words hung in the space between them like a blade. "What do you mean? The rogue pack I fought last night?" He looked up at her. "I didn't stumble across them by accident. They were here because I called them." Iris felt the room tilt. "What?" "Not directly. Not with a conscious summons." Damien's voice was hollow. "But the curse has a way of broadcasting. When I'm near my fated mate, when the bond begins to activate, the curse sends out signals. A beacon to every pack, every rogue, every hunter within 100 miles. It's drawn to conflict, to danger. It feeds on it." "So last night?" "Last night was orchestrated by the curse itself," he finished bitterly. "A test, maybe. A way of forcing the situation. Of pushing us together through shared danger, because apparently subtle attraction wasn't enough." He met her eyes, and they were filled with anguish. "I've been watching you for months, Iris, not just in dreams. I've been here, in the forest, watching your patterns, learning your routines, making sure you were safe. But in doing that, I was also marking territory. And the curse was using my presence to draw predators." Iris stepped backward, processing. "You were stalking me?" "Yes." The simplicity of the admission was somehow worse than any elaborate justification would have been. She'd felt watched. She'd attributed it to intuition, to the dreams, to some cosmic awareness of her fated bond. but it had been him, flesh and blood, predatory in the way that shifters inherently were, regardless of their intentions. "Why?" she demanded. "Why not just come to me directly? Why hide?" "Because I thought I could control it." Damien stood, agitation radiating off him. "I thought if I kept my distance, if I just observed, the curse might settle, might realize there was no viable bond, and release me from the obsession. I've spent the last 20 years watching every alpha around me suffer through mate bonds they can't maintain. I didn't want that for you. I didn't want to be the thing that destroys your life." "But you did it anyway," Iris said quietly. "Not by bonding with me immediately, but by making choices for me, by deciding what was best without giving me the option to choose." Damien flinched. "Yes." Iris moved to the kitchen window, unable to look at him. Outside, the morning had progressed. The rain had stopped. The world looked clean and normal and completely indifferent to the fact that her entire reality had just shifted. She could see the forest edge, the dark trees, and suddenly they felt less like sanctuary and more like a cage. "There's something else," Damien said quietly. "Something I haven't told you yet." Iris closed her eyes. "Of course there is. The ritual that would fully bond us, the one that would complete the marking and anchor the curse safely, it requires a sacrifice." He paused. "Not a blood sacrifice, not immediately, but a piece of something, a memory, an ability, something that matters. The curse demands balance, and balance requires a price." "What kind of price?" "It varies," he said. "For some alphas, it's been the inability to shift. For others, it's been the loss of a significant memory, something that shapes who they are." Iris turned to face him. "And you didn't think I needed to know that before you marked me?" "You're right." His silver eyes had returned, the black fading, but they were haunted now, guilty. "I should have told you everything, should have given you complete information before asking you to trust me." "I've spent months telling myself that I was protecting you, but really, I was just protecting myself from the possibility that you'd leave if you knew the truth." The honesty of it was devastating. Iris could see the war happening inside him, the genuine remorse warring with the pull of the curse, which wanted the bond completed, which wanted her to stay. She could feel it too, that magnetic draw, that sense of incompleteness that made her want to forgive him immediately and ask him to mark her again. But she was beginning to understand that the bond itself might not be trustworthy, that what felt like destiny might just be two powerful pieces of magic trying to use them both. "I need time," she said, "away from you, to think, to figure out what's real and what's the curse talking." Something like agony crossed Damien's features. "Iris." "How far away?" she asked. "How much distance do I need before the curse loses its hold on me?" He was silent for a long moment. 10 miles, perhaps. Far enough that the bond doesn't immediately activate, but you'd feel it, an ache, a pulling toward me. It would get worse the longer we're apart." "Good," Iris said, and she meant it, even as her heart shattered. "Because I need to know if I'm choosing you, or if the curse is choosing for me." Iris drove toward Millbrook with her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles had turned white. She'd left Damien at the farmhouse with explicit instructions not to follow. He'd nodded, accepting the boundary with a resignation that suggested he'd expected this, perhaps even deserved it. But as she pulled onto the mountain road that wound away from her property, she felt the ache he'd warned her about, a hollow, aching pull that made her chest feel like it was caving inward. She ignored it and pressed harder on the accelerator. The Millbrook Public Library was housed in a Victorian building that had once been a mansion, back when the town had money and promise. Now it served as a repository for local history, folklore, and the kinds of knowledge that tourists passed through town to ignore. Iris had spent countless hours here over the past 3 years, but she'd never asked the librarian, an elderly woman named Ruth, who smelled of lavender and old paper, about shifter history. Now, she walked directly to Ruth's desk. "I need everything you have on local pack history," Iris said without preamble, "going back as far as you can. Especially anything involving bloodline curses." Ruth's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. Small towns had taught her wisdom about knowing which secrets to let people keep. "That's a specific request." "I'm writing a novel," Iris lied smoothly. "Paranormal romance. Need to get the world building right." "Ah." Ruth stood with a slight groan. "Well, you've come to the right place. We have some fascinating materials, mostly oral history that was transcribed in the 1970s, but there are also some documents from the town's founding. Millbrook was established as a neutral territory between three major packs, made the transition from frontier town to proper settlement much smoother." As Ruth led her deeper into the library's restricted archives, the ache in Iris's chest intensified. The pull toward Damien was becoming less of a whisper and more of a roar, making it difficult to focus on the leather-bound journals Ruth was setting out on the reading table. "Are you all right?" Ruth asked, studying her with the keen observation of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize suffering. "You look pale." "Headache," Iris muttered, not entirely lying. "I'll be fine." Ruth didn't look convinced, but she left Iris to her research. Iris spread the documents across the table with trembling hands and began to read. The early pages were mundane: property deeds, census records, accounts of early settlements. But then she found it. A journal entry dated 1847, written in cramped, elegant script. "The Ashford family has agreed to hold the neutral ground. They are neither wolf nor blood, neither pack nor rogue. For this sacrifice, they demand protection. They ask that their children be marked with sigils, old magic that will keep them safe from the territorial disputes that plague other humans. The packs have agreed, but there is a cost. The Ashford line will carry a burden. Any shifter who comes to their land seeking refuge will be drawn there by forces beyond their control. The blood of Ashford will call to the cursed, the desperate, the fated. This is the price of neutrality." Iris's hands shook as she turned the page. The next entry was written months later, in a shakier hand. "3 rogue shifters arrived last week. They claimed they couldn't resist the pull. The eldest spoke of a curse in his bloodline, something old and hungry. He said the Ashford sigils were drawing him like a beacon. We have begun to understand the true nature of our family's bargain. We are anchors. We are traps. We are the bait by which cursed shifters are caught and bound." Iris sat back, her mind racing. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and called Damien. He answered on the first ring. "Iris, are you all right? The pull, I can feel you're in town and it's—" "My family made a bargain," she interrupted. 200 years ago. The Ashfords agreed to be neutral ground, to carry sigils that would draw in cursed shifters. My property isn't just a sanctuary, Damien. It's a trap." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. "The curse knew," he said finally, his voice strange and distant. "When I dreamed of your land, when I felt pulled there, it wasn't just the mate bond. The curse was responding to your bloodline's original purpose, to the sigils your ancestors wove into the earth itself." "Why didn't you tell me?" Iris demanded. "When you realized—" "Because I didn't know," he said, and he sounded devastated. "I suspected something was drawing me harder than normal mate bonds should, but I thought it was you. I thought it was genuine. And by the time I started to wonder, I was already too close to think clearly." Iris heard movement in the background. Damien getting to his feet, pacing. The ache in her chest was becoming unbearable now, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. "There's more," she said, continuing to read. The later entries talk about rituals, about how the Ashford sigils could be used to complete bonds that would otherwise be impossible. To give cursed shifters a chance at normal lives. "That's why the curse was so insistent," Damien said slowly. Your bloodline's magic wasn't just drawing me in, it was offering a solution, a way to balance the curse through a bond with an Ashford. Which means I might have been specifically targeted, Iris said, anger and despair warring inside her. Not because of fate, but because my DNA was useful to your curse. Or, came a new voice, because fate and magic are often indistinguishable from each other. Iris spun in her chair. A woman stood at the entrance to the archive room, tall, with silver eyes identical to Damien's and dark hair streaked with gray. She wore expensive clothes with the casual authority of someone accustomed to power. "Who are you?" Iris demanded. "My name is Serena," the woman said, moving into the room with predatory grace. "I'm Damien's mother, and I've come to tell you that everything you think you know about this situation is incomplete." Behind Serena, Iris could see Ruth at the front desk, looking confused and frightened. Serena hadn't come through the front entrance. She'd materialized from somewhere else, moved in a way that suggested shifting from wolf form back to human. "Your son is a liar," Iris said coldly. "Yes," Serena agreed, settling into a chair across from her with unsettling casualness. "All shifters lie when they're desperate. But I'm not here to defend his deceptions. I'm here to tell you what the curse actually is, and why your bloodline's bargain isn't nearly as straightforward as those old journals suggest." Serena leaned forward. "The curse wasn't created by my ancestor Iris. It was already old when he made his bargain, and your Ashford relatives didn't trap it, they partnered with it. They made a deal with something far older and far more intelligent than anyone has admitted." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the curse is alive," Serena said softly. "And it's been waiting for an Ashford bloodline member to complete the ritual for 8 generations. And now that you're here, now that Damien has marked you, it's ready to collect on that debt." The ache in Iris's chest intensified until she gasped. "What's happening?" she demanded. "The binding is accelerating," Serena said. "The curse knows its time is short. It's pulling you and Damien toward each other because the ritual completion requires both of you present. And once that happens," she paused meaningfully, "one of you will have to pay the price." Iris pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the library floor. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the ache in her chest had become so intense that moving felt like tearing herself apart. "No," she said flatly. "You're lying. Damien was honest about the curse being dangerous, but he wasn't lying about the bond. I felt—" "You felt what the curse wanted you to feel," Serena interrupted, her silver eyes never wavering. "Attraction, recognition, the sense of coming home. These are tools, Iris. Weapons designed to lower your defenses and make you willing to complete the ritual." Iris's phone buzzed in her hand. A text from Damien. "My mother is there. Don't listen to her. She's been trying to use you since before I even found you." "He's texting you," Serena observed with a thin smile. "Probably telling you I'm the enemy. Damien has always been predictable, reactive. It's why he's such a poor alpha, despite his bloodline." "Then why come here?" Iris demanded. "Why reveal yourself if you're just trying to manipulate me?" "Because the situation has become critical." Serena stood and moved closer to the archives, her fingers trailing along the spines of old journals with an intimacy that suggested familiarity. "The curse has been growing restless for decades. It's been feeding on lesser bonds, on partial connections, trying to sustain itself. But those half measures are only delaying the inevitable. It needs a full ritual completion, and it needs it soon, or it will begin consuming everything indiscriminately, the packs, the territory, possibly the entire region." "And what does that have to do with me?" Iris asked, though she was beginning to understand. "Your bloodline made a bargain, but they misunderstood what they were bargaining with." Serena pulled out one of the oldest journals, leather so worn it was nearly falling apart. "The Ashfords didn't partner with the curse to trap it. They partnered with something older." a spirit being that existed before the shifter bloodlines were established, a force that was dying because the packs had moved beyond needing its intervention. Iris felt cold fingers walk down her spine. What are you saying? I'm saying the spirit that created the curse was trying to survive, Serena said. It was fading from the world because shifters no longer required the old magic to maintain their forms. So it made a bargain with Damien's ancestor, create a bloodline curse that would feed on that ancient magic, and in return, the spirit would have a conduit through which to continue existing. Your family agreed to provide the anchoring magic, the sigils, that would make the curse stable. That's insane, Iris whispered. That's pragmatism, Serena corrected. Both parties got what they needed. The spirit survived. The curse became manageable. Your family became neutral ground where desperate shifters could find sanctuary. Everyone benefited. She paused, until the spirit began to grow impatient. Serena opened the ancient journal and pointed to a passage written in different handwriting, dated 1924. The presence grows restless. We can feel it moving beneath the sigils like something trapped in ice. It demands completion. It says the partial bonds are no longer sufficient. It hungers for a true union, a full mate bond sealed by Ashford blood and cursed bloodline both, merged into a single entity. The Council refuses to sacrifice another family member. We will attempt to seal the bargain deeper, to buy more time. They tried to strengthen the binding, Iris said slowly, to buy time without completing the ritual. Yes, and for a while it worked. Serena closed the journal gently. But magic has a lifespan, Iris. Bindings erode, sigils fade. Your farmhouse was the original anchor point, the place where your ancestors performed the ritual 200 years ago. The magic there is wearing thin, the spirit is beginning to manifest more openly, and that's what brought Damien to you. He didn't know, Iris said, though it came out as a question. He suspected, Serena corrected. Damien is many things, but he's not stupid. He knew his pull toward you was stronger than a normal mate bond should be. He knew something about you was resonating with the curse in unusual ways. But he chose not to investigate too deeply because he wanted the bond to be real. He wanted to believe that fate had given him something genuine rather than something orchestrated by ancient magic and family bargains. The ache in Iris's chest was becoming unbearable. She pressed her hand against her ribs, feeling her heart hammer against her palm. What happens if I complete the ritual? Serena's expression softened slightly, the first sign of genuine emotion Iris had seen from her. The curse stabilizes. The spirit's hunger is sated. You and Damien become bound at a level that goes beyond normal mate bonds. You share a connection to that ancient magic, which means you also share its longevity. You'll live longer than most humans, and you'll be tied to Damien's survival in ways that are both beautiful and terrifying. And the price? Damien mentioned a price. The price varies, Serena said. For some, it's memories. For others, abilities. In your case, given your bloodline's specific role, the price would likely be your connection to the human world. You would become partially attuned to the supernatural. You would begin to see and sense things that most humans miss. You would no longer fit comfortably in either world. That's not a price, Iris said bitterly. That's a transformation. Yes. The word hung between them, heavy with implications. Iris stood and moved to the archive window, looking out at the autumn street beyond. Millbrook looked so normal, so safe, so completely indifferent to the fact that ancient magic was pulsing beneath its surface, demanding completion. Why are you telling me this? Iris asked. If you want the ritual completed, why not just let Damien and me stumble toward it blindly? Because I've watched 7 alphas before Damien try to complete similar rituals, Serena said quietly. And I've watched every single one fail because they couldn't accept the true nature of what they were doing. They wanted to believe it was love. They wanted to believe it was fate. And that denial broke them. It broke their bonds. And in 3 cases, It broke the people they were trying to mate with. She moved to stand beside Iris at the window. My son loves you, Iris. That part is real. Supernatural bonding doesn't negate genuine emotion. It amplifies it. But if you complete this ritual, you need to do it with full knowledge that you're not just choosing Damien. You're choosing to become a vessel for something far older and far more powerful than either of you. You're choosing to anchor an ancient spirit to this world through your bloodline. And if I refuse? Iris asked, though she could already feel the answer pulling at her. Then the curse will begin consuming everything around it as it tries to survive. Your farmhouse will become ground zero for a supernatural collapse. Damien will go mad trying to resist the pull, and eventually the spirit will find another Ashford to complete the ritual with, willing or not. Iris felt the ache in her chest shift into something sharper, something like urgency. I need to talk to Damien, she said, without you, without influence. Serena nodded and stepped back. He's waiting for you at the farm. But Iris? She caught her eye as Iris moved toward the door. Whatever you decide, decide it quickly. The binding is accelerating. In another day or two, the choice may not be yours to make anymore. The drive back to the farmhouse was a blur of mountain roads and darkening sky. The ache in Iris's chest had evolved into something living, a constant pulsing awareness of Damien that made it impossible to think clearly. Every mile she covered felt like tearing something vital from her body, and relief flooded through her the moment she turned onto her property. Damien was waiting on the porch. He looked devastated. His silver eyes were hollow, his dark hair disheveled, and his clothes bore the faint stains of dried blood. Whether his own or from something else, Iris couldn't determine. The moment he saw her car pull up the drive, he moved toward her with desperate urgency, but stopped short, respecting the boundaries she'd demanded. I know, he said before she could speak. About the bargain, about the spirit, about what completing the ritual actually means. How long have you known? Iris demanded, slamming her car door shut. Since I was 16, Damien admitted. His voice was raw, fractured. My father told me when he realized I was manifesting the curse faster than previous alphas. He said the spirit was growing more aggressive, that it was beginning to bleed through the sigils more openly. He told me it was my responsibility to find an Ashford and complete the binding before the whole system collapsed. Iris felt something inside her break. And you've known this entire time? When you were watching me? When you marked me? Yes. The word was barely a whisper. And I hated myself for it every single day. She moved past him into the farmhouse, unable to look at him. The interior of her sanctuary felt different now, charged with an energy that thrummed through the walls themselves. The sigils. She could see them now that she knew to look, faint glyphs carved into the doorframes and floorboards, so old they were nearly invisible, but still radiating purpose. Your mother said the curse is dying, Iris said, not turning around. That it needs completion, or it will start consuming everything indiscriminately. That's not entirely accurate. Damien followed her inside but maintained distance, as if proximity was physically painful for him. The curse isn't dying. The spirit is. It's been feeding on lesser bonds for decades, sustained by the pack members who came to your land seeking refuge. But those connections are temporary. They break when the shifters leave. The spirit needs something permanent. A true mate bond sealed by both bloodlines. By my bloodline, Iris said bitterly. My family created this bargain, so I get to pay the price. That's not how it works. Isn't it? She finally turned to face him. Your mother explained it perfectly. The Ashfords created the sigils. The Ashfords anchored the spirit. So naturally, an Ashford has to complete the ritual. Just like naturally, you were chosen by the curse to be the one to seduce me into willing participation. Iris, that's not... Damien's jaw tightened. Yes. Fine. Yes, the curse pushed me toward you. Yes, it amplified my instincts. But everything I feel for you is real. I would have loved you regardless of the curse, regardless of the ritual. You have to believe. I don't have to believe anything, Iris interrupted. I'm tired of being manipulated by forces I don't understand. I'm tired of having choices made for me by magic and family bargains and ancient spirits that decided my bloodline owed them a debt. She moved to the kitchen window and looked out at the forest. In the gathering dusk, she could almost see it, the shimmer of ancient magic just beneath the surface of reality, pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Your mother said I have another day or two before the choice stops being mine, Iris said quietly. What happens after that? Damien didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. The binding becomes automatic. You'll begin the transformation whether you consent or not. The ritual will complete itself through the bond. And what happens to you if I refuse to participate willingly? The curse will consume me, he said simply. It will burn through my consciousness trying to find another Ashford. I'll go mad. Eventually I'll become a rogue, feral, dangerous. They'll have to put me down before I hurt someone. Iris closed her eyes. This was the breaking point, she realized. This was where the illusion of choice shattered completely, because there was no real choice here yet. Either she participated in the ritual and transformed into something other than human, or she condemned Damien to a fate worse than death. Did you ever consider that option? She asked. Before you came to me? Did you ever think about just accepting the curse and letting it consume you? Every day, Damien said. For the past 8 years, I've been waiting for the moment when I would decide it was preferable to madness. And then I started dreaming of you, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't give up the possibility of having something real, even if it was built on a foundation of lies. That's remarkably selfish, Iris said, and she meant it. But there was no anger in her voice anymore, just exhaustion and a terrible crystalline clarity. Yes, Damien agreed. It is. Iris turned from the window to face him fully. In the dimming light, she could see the truth of his suffering, the way the curse was already beginning to consume him from the inside, the faint translucence at the edges of his form that suggested his human reality was beginning to slip. How long do you have? She asked. Before the madness starts? Maybe a week if I try to resist, less if the curse decides to accelerate. He met her eyes, and there was acceptance in them. Resignation. You don't have to do this, Iris. You can leave. You can go to a city far away and break the connection. It will hurt, both of us, but you'll survive it. You'll get your freedom. And you'll go mad and become a rogue shifter hunted by every pack in the territory, Iris said flatly. Yes. She moved closer to him, studying his face in the fading light. She could see the man beneath the curse now, not just the alpha, not just the fated mate, but Damien himself. A person who'd been trapped by circumstances beyond his control, just as she was. A person who'd made terrible choices, yes, but choices made from desperation and the weight of inherited responsibility. My family made a bargain, she said slowly, 200 years ago, and I've spent my entire life trying to escape the consequences of their choices, running to this farmhouse, isolating myself, pretending I could exist outside of the larger world and its demands. She paused. Maybe it's time I stopped running and actually made a choice of my own. Iris, I'm not doing this for you, she said firmly. I'm doing this because the alternative is letting an ancient spirit die and condemning you to madness. I'm doing it because, at some point, someone has to acknowledge the original bargain and either honor it or break it consciously, not passively, not through avoidance. She took his hand. The moment their skin touched, the pull intensified, but instead of fighting it, Iris leaned into the sensation. Tell me what the ritual requires, all of it. No more partial truths. Damien's fingers trembled as they gripped hers. The ritual needs to be performed at the anchor point, your family's original ritual ground, and it needs to happen during the new moon, When the veil between worlds is thinnest, that's 3 days from now. Then we have 3 days to figure out if this bond is real enough to survive the truth, Iris said, and she pulled him closer, no longer running from her destiny, but stepping directly into its teeth. The ritual ground was hidden. Iris would never have found it without Damien's guidance, a clearing deep in the forest that existed in a fold of reality, accessible only to those who carried Ashford blood or were bonded to someone who did. As they pushed through the final veil of undergrowth, the world seemed to exhale, and suddenly they were standing in a circle of ancient stones that gleamed with faded sigil work. The new moon was 3 days away. They had come to prepare. Damien moved through the clearing with the careful precision of someone handling something sacred and dangerous in equal measure. His silver eyes traced the sigils, checking for degradation, for places where the magic had worn thin. Iris watched him work, trying to reconcile the man before her, methodical, careful, deeply respectful of the magic, with the predator who had been watching her from the forest for months. "The stones were placed by your ancestor," Damien said, not looking up. "They anchor the sigils to the earth itself. If they're damaged, the binding fails. If the binding fails—" "The spirit bleeds through," Iris finished. She'd spent the last 2 days reading the old journals, absorbing 8 generations' worth of warnings and failed rituals. "And everything in a 10-mile radius gets caught in the collapse." Approximately. Iris knelt beside one of the stones and ran her fingers across its surface. The moment her skin made contact, she felt it. A vast, ancient presence pressing against the boundary between worlds. It was vast and hungry, and so desperately lonely that her breath caught. This wasn't evil. This was something that had existed since before time had a shape, slowly fading from a world that no longer needed it. "It's in pain," she whispered. "Yes," Damien said softly. "That's what most people don't understand about the curse. It's not malevolent. It's suffering. A dying thing trying desperately to survive by any means available." A sound cut through the forest, the crack of a branch, the displacement of air that suggested something large moving fast. Damien's entire body went rigid. His hand moved to Iris's shoulder, pulling her behind him with an instinct that was pure predator. "Stay down," he breathed. The wolves emerged from the darkness like ghosts materializing from shadow. There were 5 of them, each the size of a small car, their fur bristling with an aggression that needed no translation. Rogue pack. The same pack Damien had fought during the storm, Iris realized. They'd been tracking him all along, waiting for him to lead them to the anchor point. "Damien Blackthorn," one of them snarled, shifting seamlessly into human form, a scarred man with eyes like molten amber. "The Alpha King thinks he can hide in human territory and complete a forbidden ritual? The Council of Packs sends its regards." "This doesn't concern you," Damien said, his voice dropping into something cold and ancient. His own form began to shift, muscles rippling beneath his skin as his wolf tried to surface. "This is pack business. Internal magic." "Internal magic that threatens us all," the rogue spat. "If the spirit breaks free, if it tears through the veil, the entire supernatural order collapses. We can't allow that." "Then you're too late," another voice said. Serena emerged from the trees, and she was magnificent, a wolf the size of a small house, her fur silver and black, her eyes blazing with authority. Behind her came a dozen more wolves, each bearing the distinctive markings of the Blackthorn pack. "Mother," Damien breathed, shock and relief warring across his face. "Did you think I came here to manipulate you both, just to leave you unprotected?" Serena shifted back to human form with casual grace, fully nude and utterly unbothered. "I came to ensure the ritual completed safely, which means no rogue interruptions." The scarred rogue's lip curled. "You're betraying the council." "I'm saving them," Serena interrupted coldly. "The spirit has been dying for decades. If the ritual doesn't complete, The collapse will be catastrophic. Every pack, every territory, every human city in a 100-mile radius will be affected. You know this. The council knows this. But they were too cowardly to act, so they sent you to prevent the inevitable. Violence exploded outward. The rogues shifted and attacked, a coordinated assault designed to separate Damien from Iris. But Serena's pack met them mid-charge, and the clearing became chaos, blood and fur and the sound of bone-breaking violence. Damien shifted, his massive wolf form placing himself between Iris and the fighting, his teeth snapping at any rogue who dared approach her. But one of them was faster. A smaller rogue, a female, ducked under Damien's guard and lunged directly at Iris. Iris felt the moment approaching with crystalline clarity. The rogue's jaws opening, the silver glint of fangs, the inevitability of violence touching her at last. She didn't run. Instead, she reached out and touched the closest stone. The magic that exploded outward wasn't controlled. It wasn't refined. It was pure, raw Ashford power. The accumulated weight of 200 years of sigil work and ancestral binding suddenly channeled through living blood. The clearing blazed with light so bright, it turned the night into day, and every supernatural creature within it screamed as the ancient magic reasserted itself over the space. The rogue female was thrown backward, the magic burning across her fur and forcing her into human form, gasping and terrified. The other rogues fell back, recognizing what had happened, and Ashford had activated the anchor directly. Iris felt the power moving through her like lightning, rewriting her from the inside out. She could feel her humanity beginning to fray at the edges, her perception expanding to encompass layers of reality she'd never suspected existed. The spirit's presence became clear, not a thing of evil, but a vast consciousness slowly dissolving into nothing, desperate for one final anchor to existence. Damien shifted back to human form and pulled her against him, shielding her from the residual magic with his own body. "You're accelerating the transformation," he said urgently. "Iris, you need to stop." "I can feel it," she gasped. "I can feel what it wants. It doesn't want to hurt us. It wants to merge. It wants to be part of something that will survive." "The ritual isn't until the new moon." "The ritual is happening now," Iris said, and her voice sounded strange, layered with something other than human. "Because I'm choosing it. Not because the curse is forcing me, not because of bargains or family debt, because I choose to." She turned to face him, and her eyes had begun to shift, not silver like his, but shot through with starlight, with the faint gleam of ancient magic. "I choose you. I choose the bond, and I choose to let the spirit pass through me so it doesn't have to die alone." Damien stared at her, his expression caught between hope and horror. "You don't understand what you're—" "I understand perfectly," Iris interrupted, "and I'm doing it anyway." The clearing erupted with light again as she pulled him closer, as she opened herself fully to the binding, as the ancient spirit found its anchor at last, and began the transformation that would change everything. The transformation lasted hours or seconds. Iris couldn't determine which. Time had become a flexible thing, bending around the moment of binding. She existed in multiple states simultaneously, human and other, mortal and eternal, individual, and merged with something vast that had been dying for centuries. The spirit's consciousness unfurled inside her, like a flower blooming and fast forward. It showed her things, memories that weren't hers but felt like they belonged to her now. She saw the world before shifters existed, when the spirit had been young and full of purpose. She saw the slow fade as humanity evolved its own forms of power, and the old magic became obsolete. She felt the desperate hunger that had driven it to make the bargain with Damien's ancestor, the way it had clung to existence through increasingly thin threads. And then she felt Damien. His consciousness merged with hers. Not subsuming but complementing. Where the spirit was vast and ancient, Damien was immediate and real, grounded in the present moment, in the specific texture of loving one particular person. The three consciousnesses, Iris, Damien, and the spirit, wove together into something that was none of them individually, but all of them collectively. When Iris opened her eyes, she was lying on the stone circle, and Damien was holding her like she might dissolve if he let go. "Welcome back," he whispered against her hair. Iris pushed herself up carefully. Her body felt strange, lighter somehow, but also more solid, as if she was occupying reality more completely than before. She looked down at her hands and saw the faint shimmer of starlight beneath her skin, visible only if you knew to look. The mark on her neck where Damien had bitten her had transformed into something more complex, a sigil that matched the ones carved into the stones around them. "The spirit," she said, her voice strange and multi-layered. "I can feel it. It's calm, at peace." "It's bonded to you now," Damien said. He looked exhausted and radiant simultaneously. "Which means it's bonded to me through you. The curse is balanced. It can't consume me anymore because it has an anchor that's willing, permanent." Serena approached, her pack forming a protective perimeter around them. The rogues had retreated, the scarred male dragging his wounded packmates back into the forest. She knelt beside Iris with an expression that was almost gentle. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I'm not entirely sure which thoughts are mine anymore," Iris admitted. "But not in a bad way. It's like living in mono for my entire life and suddenly hearing in stereo. There's depth I didn't know existed." "That's the spirit's perception merging with yours," Serena explained. "You'll adjust. Most Ashfords take a few months to fully integrate the changes, but the bond will guide you. The spirit is experienced with this. It's been anchored to your bloodline for 2 centuries." Iris looked at Damien, studying him with new eyes. She could see the curse now, not as a dark thing, but as a golden thread woven through his entire being, pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. It wasn't his enemy. It never had been. It was simply part of what he was. And now, it was part of her too. "Come here," she said, extending her hand. Damien moved to her without hesitation, and when their fingers intertwined, the sensation was so complete it brought tears to her eyes. The bond between them wasn't hidden anymore. It blazed like a constellation visible in the space between their joined hands, silver and gold and starlight all woven together. "I can feel you," Iris whispered. "Everything. Your fear, your joy, your regret about how you handled this, your love." She paused. "That part's real. That was always real, wasn't it? Underneath the curse, underneath the manipulation, underneath all of it." "Yes," Damien said hoarsely. "From the moment I first dreamed of you, that was real. Even though you were watching me without permission? Especially because of that." He cupped her face gently, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "I was obsessed with you before I understood why. The curse drew me, yes. But once I saw you, really saw you, nothing else mattered. I would have loved you regardless of any ritual or bloodline bargain." Iris leaned her forehead against his. "I believe you, and I forgive you. Not because the curse is telling me to, but because I can feel your regret. And I know you meant it. I know you would change things if you could." "I would," Damien agreed. "But I'm also grateful I can't, because it brought you to me." Serena cleared her throat delicately. "As touching as this is, we need to move. The council will send stronger opposition once they realize the ritual has completed. We need to get you both to safe territory." "Where?" Iris asked, reluctant to break physical contact with Damien. "The Blackthorn estate," Serena said. "Deep in pack territory. The council won't dare attack there. And you'll have time to adjust to your transformation without outside pressure." Iris nodded slowly, but something in her, something that was part of her and part of the ancient spirit, rebelled against the idea of leaving. "No," she said. "I want to go back to the farmhouse." "That's not safe," Serena began. "It is," Iris interrupted. Because that's where the original anchor point is. That's where my family made the bargain. And I think the spirit wants to go home. She could feel it. The vast, ancient consciousness inside her settling with something like relief at the prospect of returning to the place where it had been tethered for so long. Not as a prison, but as a sanctuary. The farmhouse is neutral ground, Serena said slowly, understanding dawning in her silver eyes. No pack can claim it. Which means no pack can attack it. Exactly, Iris said, which makes it the perfect place for us to begin. Damien needs to learn how to live with the curse balanced. I need to learn how to exist as something that's no longer entirely human. And the spirit needs to rest after 200 years of desperate survival. She looked at Damien, seeing the question in his eyes. Unless you want to go to the estate instead? No, he pulled her closer. I want to go wherever you are. If that's the farmhouse, then that's where I belong. Serena studied them both for a long moment, then smiled, a rare expression of genuine warmth. Your father would have wanted this, she said softly to Damien. A real bond, one built on actual choice, not obligation. As the pack began to move through the forest, escorting them back toward the farmhouse, Iris felt the weight of transformation settling into her bones. She was no longer entirely human. She would never again fit comfortably in the world she'd known. But as Damien held her hand and the ancient spirit pulsed contentedly through her veins, Iris realized she didn't want to. She'd spent 3 years running from her family's legacy. Now, finally, she was ready to step into it. Not as a victim of circumstance, but as a conscious choice. The new moon rose above the trees, and in its darkness, she felt finally, truly, free. They had 5 days of peace, 5 days where Iris learned the contours of her new existence, 5 days where she and Damien existed in a strange, beautiful bubble at the farmhouse, learning each other's bodies and minds with a tenderness that felt earned rather than fated. The spirit inside her became less of an invading presence and more of a constant companion, offering ancient knowledge and perspective whenever she opened herself to it. She could see the supernatural now, could watch the way magic moved through the world like water through a river, could sense the pack territories that ringed Millbrook, careful boundaries respected by generations of shifters who understood the value of neutral ground. The council's emissary arrived on the 6th day. Iris sensed him before she saw him, a presence moving through the forest with deliberate slowness, a signal that he came unarmed and under flag of truce. She was in the kitchen when she felt it, preparing dinner with hands that were still learning to be human in a body that was becoming something else. Damien appeared in the doorway moments later, his expression grim. "It's Marcus," he said. "The council's speaker. This is formal." They met him on the porch as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Marcus was older, perhaps 60, with silver threading through his dark hair, and a face that had been handsome before. Time carved too many difficult decisions into it. He wore the formal attire of his position, a dark coat embroidered with sigils that marked him as neutral territory between all packs. "Damien Blackthorne," he said formally. "Iris Ashford. The council has sent me to deliver their judgment regarding the ritual completion at the anchor point 3 days ago." "And what is their judgment?" Iris asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Marcus's eyes, a warm brown that seemed to hold genuine sadness, moved between them. "That the ritual was performed without council approval, that the completion of a bloodline curse binding without proper oversight violates the accords that have governed pack behavior for 500 years, that you have created a dangerous precedent that threatens the stability of all supernatural territories." "The ritual was necessary," Damien said coldly. "The spirit was dying. The binding was the only way to—" "I know," Marcus interrupted gently. "The council knows. And they're not here to deny the necessity, they're here to enforce the consequences. Which are? Iris asked. Exile, Marcus said. Both of you, from all recognized pack territories. You're free to live among humans, but you cannot claim protection from any pack, cannot access pack resources, cannot participate in pack governance. In essence, you become rogue yourselves. The words hit like a physical blow. Iris felt Damien's shock reverberating through their bond, not at the punishment itself, but at the weight of it. An alpha without a pack was like a star without gravity. He would drift, lose definition, eventually burn out entirely. That's not possible, Damien said flatly. I'm the Blackthorn Alpha. The pack is my responsibility. I can't abandon them. Then you refuse the exile, Marcus said, and there was no satisfaction in his voice, only weary inevitability. Which means the council has authorized the challenge. He shifted as he spoke, his human form dissolving into that of a massive gray wolf with markings that denoted his status as council champion. The transformation was elegant and controlled, demonstrating centuries of practice. You know the rules, Marcus said, his voice still perfectly clear despite the wolf's shape. The binding can be broken if you lose. The spirit will be released, the curse will revert to its original form, and you will both be remanded to council custody for the safety of supernatural territories. Damien began to shift, his body rippling as his wolf emerged, but Iris grabbed his arm, stopping him mid-transformation. No, she said. Both Damien and Marcus froze, surprised by her interruption. This is my fight, Iris continued. She could feel the spirit moving inside her, ancient and patient. Could sense the depths of magic at her disposal now that she was bonded to it completely. Not his. If the council has a problem with the ritual completion, then they should challenge the person who actually completed it. Iris. You're human, Marcus began, but she was already pulling off her shoes. I'm not human anymore, she said simply. And she opened herself to the transformation. It was nothing like what she'd experienced during the binding. This was deliberate, controlled, a choice made with full consciousness. Her bones restructured themselves, her skin rippled and reformed, and when she dropped to all fours, she was no longer occupying a human shape. She was a wolf, but not like the others. Her fur shimmered with starlight, silver and gold woven through black, and her eyes held depths that contained entire universes. The ancient spirit had given her its form, had allowed her to carry its consciousness in a shape that could move through the world. Marcus took a step backward, genuine shock crossing his lupine features. The Ashford bloodline carries the original sigils, Iris said, her voice resonating with harmonics that weren't entirely wolf. My family created the anchor, which means I have a claim to this magic that predates your council by centuries. And I'm not willing to let you break a bond that has brought peace to a dying spirit and healing to an alpha who never deserved the curse in the first place. You understand the consequences of refusing exile? Marcus asked, though he sounded less certain now. The council will declare war on any pack that harbors you. Then no pack will harbor us, Iris said, because we don't need them. We have the farmhouse. We have neutral ground. And we have magic older than your accords. She lunged. The fight was brief and brutal. Marcus was skilled, generations of council training evident in every move, but he was fighting an Ashford bonded to an ancient spirit, and that was something outside his experience. Iris moved with a grace that felt like the wolf had been part of her forever, her teeth finding purchase on his shoulder, driving him backward into the forest. She didn't try to kill him. That wasn't the point. The point was to demonstrate that she could defend what was hers, that the bond couldn't be broken by force of strength alone. After several minutes of fierce combat, Marcus shifted back to human form, breathing hard, bleeding from multiple wounds that would heal within hours. I concede, he said, and there was something like respect in his voice. The council will receive my report, whether they accept this outcome. He paused, wiping blood from his mouth. That remains to be seen. Iris shifted back to human form as well, surprised by how easy the transformation had become. She stood naked and blood-spattered on her farmhouse porch and felt no shame. "Tell them," she said, "that the Ashford line has reclaimed its authority, that the neutral ground stands, and that if the council wants to challenge that, they'll have to face an ancient spirit and two people who have nothing left to lose." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll tell them," he said. "And Iris, for what it's worth, I hope they listen." He shifted again and disappeared into the forest, leaving only the faint scent of blood and respect behind. Winter came early to the mountains that year. 3 months after Marcus departed with his report, snow lay thick across the farmhouse property, muffling the world into silence. Iris stood at the kitchen window watching the forest edge, where the ancient trees wore crowns of white and ice, gleamed like scattered diamonds. The council's response had come 2 weeks ago. Not a declaration of war, but a careful negotiation. They couldn't break the bond without triggering catastrophic consequences. Marcus had made that clear in his report. But they also couldn't simply accept that an Ashford and an Alpha had rewritten the rules of supernatural governance. The compromise, the farmhouse would remain neutral ground, protected by ancient law. Damien would retain his title as Alpha of the Blackthorn Pack, but he would rule from exile, advised by council rather than present in person. Iris would be recognized as a guardian, a new position created specifically for her, one that allowed her to maintain the anchor and interface between human and supernatural worlds. It wasn't perfect, but it was survival. "You're thinking too loudly," Damien said, appearing behind her with 2 mugs of tea. His silver eyes had softened in the months since the binding, becoming less predatory and more genuinely warm. The curse still moved through him, would always move through him, but it no longer controlled his every action. It was simply part of what he was, like breathing or loving. Iris accepted the mug and leaned back against him. This intimacy, the casual physical connection, had become as essential to her as oxygen. "I'm wondering if we made the right choice," she admitted. "Staying here, accepting the guardian position. Sometimes I wonder if we should have just run. Disappeared into the human world and pretended none of this was real." "Would you have been happy?" Damien asked, pressing his lips against her hair. "No," Iris said honestly. "The spirit would have been miserable, and honestly, so would I. I spent 3 years trying to run from my family's legacy. Now I'm finally understanding why they made the bargain in the first place, why they chose to anchor something ancient rather than let it die alone." The spirit stirred within her, a gentle presence that had become so integrated into her consciousness that sometimes she forgot where it ended and she began. It shared her thoughts now, her memories, her love, and she carried its ancient knowledge, its perspective, its longing for peace. A knock at the door pulled them from their reverie. Iris and Damien exchanged a glance. They rarely had visitors. The isolation was deliberate, a boundary they'd established to give themselves space to heal and adjust. But when Iris opened the door, she found Margaret Chen from the grocery, stamping snow from her boots and holding a covered dish. "I know you two are trying to be hermits," Margaret said, pushing past them with the casual authority of someone who'd appointed herself town guardian. "But I'm not having it. You're living out here alone, and that's not natural, and I made lasagna, so you're eating it whether you like it or not." Behind Margaret stood Ruth, the library keeper, also laden with covered dishes. And behind her, surprisingly, was the mayor, looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Word's been spreading," the mayor said awkwardly, "about what you are, about what's happening at this property. Some folks are scared. But Margaret and Ruth here convinced me that maybe we should extend an olive branch instead of pitchforks, so we brought food, and I'm here to officially acknowledge that you're part of Millbrook, whether you like it or not." Iris felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been sealed since her parents died. She'd spent so long believing that she could only be safe in isolation, that community was a trap, that only ended in grief. But looking at these people, imperfect, curious, fundamentally kind humans who didn't fully understand what they were accepting but were accepting it anyway, she realized that maybe safety wasn't about isolation. Maybe it was about choosing to be known anyway. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "It's cold." Over the next hours, the farmhouse, which had been quiet and still for so long, filled with warmth and laughter and the kind of mundane human connection that Iris had forgotten was possible. Margaret dominated the kitchen, insisting on teaching Iris the proper way to make dumplings, complaining good-naturedly about her knife skills. Ruth and Damien found themselves in deep conversation about old folklore and the reality behind the legends. The mayor relaxed with brandy and eventually admitted he'd always suspected something was odd about the property, but was glad to know it wasn't dangerous. "My grandmother used to say the Ashford place was blessed," Margaret mentioned as they folded dough together. "She said people who were lost found themselves here, that it was a place where broken things could mend." Iris looked around her kitchen, at Damien laughing with Ruth about a particularly creative interpretation of shifter mythology, at Margaret's hands teaching hers the exact pressure needed to create the perfect fold, at the mayor nodding off peacefully by the fire. "I think maybe your grandmother was right," she said softly. As midnight approached and her guests began to depart, Damien walked them to the door. Margaret paused on the threshold and pulled Iris aside. "I've lost people," Margaret said quietly. "My husband, my son. I know what it's like to think you can't survive more pain, so you might as well stop living entirely." She squeezed Iris's hand. "But you've clearly found something worth living for. Don't lose that just because it's complicated." After they left, Iris and Damien stood on the porch watching the snow fall. The ancient spirit pulsed gently within her. Content, no longer desperate, it had found its anchor, its purpose, its reason to continue existing. And in doing so, it had given Iris permission to stop running. "Do you regret it?" Damien asked. "The marking, the bond, all of it." "No," Iris said immediately. "I regret how it started. I regret the manipulation and the lies. But I don't regret choosing you. And I don't regret choosing to stay and defend this place." She turned to face him. "Do you?" "Never," he said, and she could feel the truth of it through the bond, deeper than words. "You saved me, Iris. Not from the curse, you just accepted it. But you saved me from becoming the kind of alpha my father was. Isolated, terrified, alone." She kissed him then, there in the snow, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. The curse pulsed, not threatening, but acknowledging. The ancient spirit sang, not with hunger, but with peace. Inside the farmhouse, the fire crackled, casting warm light across walls that had stood for decades. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the farmhouse in white, erasing the boundaries between earth and sky, between human and supernatural, between what was and what could be. The neutral ground remained neutral. The cursed alpha had found his anchor, the Ashford bloodline had reclaimed its purpose. And in a farmhouse on the edge of a small mountain town, three consciousness, one mortal, one ancient, one eternally bound between them, settled into the hard-won peace of being finally, fully home.